Hello and welcome back. This is lesson number 4 and we're going to start looking at meiosis today. I hope you enjoyed the DNA extraction from the banana and maybe even had a go at home. I won't go on too long about what the changes are to do with the government because we're still awaiting on them, but it does sound as if, as you know, you will probably be going back to school on the 1st of June. So that gives you May, a whole month now, to try to keep up with if you can. But luckily the exams have been put back to closer to Christmas time. So we will still carry on with these lessons because, as I said before, it's better to be prepared for the exams when they do come along rather than have to catch up so much when you go back to school. So I hope they'll still be helpful and useful for you. So we're looking at meiosis today, which is a type of cell division. It's a special type of cell division because it only occurs within the reproductive organs and the reproductive tissues of plants and animals. Some people forget about plants. It's important to remember that they also have reproductive tissue, which we'll talk about. Before we do meiosis though, I thought it would be a good idea to recap on mitosis, which is another type of cell division which you would have looked at in grade 10. Because it's important to know the differences between these two types of cell division. So just as a recap, and I will leave a link on the end of this video to a very good revision guide that you can download and use offline. And mitosis is in there as well under the grade 12. It's all grade 12 information, but they have covered mitosis and there are better diagrams than I could give you. So we'll go through it quickly. Because mitosis is the type of cell division that every cell in our body has to undergo as we grow. So to allow all organisms, animals and plants to grow, cells need to keep dividing by mitosis, and also so that when we injure ourselves, we can repair the tissue. So mitosis is for growth and repair, and happens in all of our, what we call our somatic cells, or our body cells, or normal body cells, outside of the reproductive organs. Okay, and even within the reproductive organs, some of those cells do undergo mitosis as well, and we'll come to that later. So, revision for you, here's mitosis. So there's 5 stages that you need to remember, but number 1 isn't really part of mitosis. Number 1 is part of the cell cycle, but it has to happen for mitosis to take place, okay, for cell division to take place. So this is known as interphase, and this is, as I said, part of the cell cycle. And this is where the DNA replicates itself, which is very important, as we said before. The DNA must replicate itself before the cell divides, so that each new cell will have a copy of the same DNA. So it has to replicate itself, and it does that during interphase, so that now we've got a double set of DNA present in the cell. Number 2 is prophase. This is really the beginning of mitosis, prophase. Okay, pro is usually a word used to describe the beginning of something or before something happens. So during prophase, chromatin condenses, it says. That just means all of the genetic material, the chromosomes and everything, all condense and they kind of shrink during prophase, so they shrink up into a tighter mass. The chromosomes that we have now consist of 2 chromatids, so they're identical chromatids because we've replicated the DNA. So the chromosomes consist of 2 chromatids, sister chromatids. Okay. And this is also the stage where your spindle fiber forms as well. The spindle fibers are going to be important to contract later on to pull chromosomes apart. So they form during prophase. And also your nuclear membrane dissolves. So because this genetic material is going to have to come out of the nucleus, so the nuclear membrane will break down during prophase. The next one, number 3, is metaphase. Okay, so this is where your chromosomes line up at the equator. So they're lined up in a straight line at the equator during metaphase, and they're held together because you've got 2 chromosomes being held together at the centromere, okay, which is another important word to remember. Then we've got anaphase, number 4. This is where your chromatids will separate and they're pulled by the spindle fibers to the opposite end of the cell. Okay, so you've already replicated the DNA, you've got 2 copies, you've got sister chromatids, and then they're going to separate and each one is pulled to the opposite end of the cell, but they are the same because it's replicated DNA. Telophase is the final stage of mitosis, and this is where your chromosomes decondense now, so they start to spread out again. They're not all condensed, obviously, they spread out again during this phase. And also cytokinesis takes place, or cytokinesis, however you want to pronounce it. That's basically the splitting up of the cell into 2 daughter cells. So the cell is going to divide. So when it actually physically divides into 2, we call that cytokinesis. Okay, and we have 2 daughter cells produced, and obviously they are going to be identical to the parent cell because we replicated the DNA at the beginning in interphase, and then after that we just separated the chromosomes to each pole, and then the cell divided in 2, so each one has a copy of the same DNA that the parent cell had. Okay, so that's mitosis. I hope that was clear, but you can go back to your grade 10 material and check that out. So meiosis is another type of cell division, and it's known as reduction division, and that's because every time the cells divide, the genetic material, the DNA, reduces, and it reduces by half. So that's a big difference here with meiosis. So it produces 4 daughter cells this time, and each one has half of the amount of DNA of the parent cell. So that's really important to remember about meiosis. So they're not the same, they're not identical to the parent cell in this case in meiosis. Okay, so as I said, meiosis takes place in the male and the female reproductive organs of plants and animals. Okay, so I have a diagram, not that this is complicated, but a lot of people forget about plants. Okay, so this is our reproductive tissue where meiosis takes place, this type of cell division. So in animals, which obviously you'll probably remember easily, the males, it's the testes, part of the reproductive system of males, testes, especially in mammals, and females in the ovaries. So that's where meiosis takes place in animals. If we look at plants, the flower itself is actually the reproductive part of the plant. So the flower is just for reproduction. Okay, so it usually has both male and female parts in the same flower. So the female part again is called the ovary. Each flower will have an ovary, and the male parts are called the anthers. The anthers are the bits that stick up from inside the flower. Those are the male parts, and that's where meiosis will take place as well. So it's equivalent to the testes in animals, is the anthers. I actually have a flower to show you as well, because I don't know if you've dissected any flowers in school. So here's one I picked earlier. It's a rose. So I wanted to show you, without dissecting it, that underneath here we have a bulge, and that bulge right at the bottom there, that's the ovary. Okay, so if you can see that is the ovary, that bulgy bit there. So that's the female part of the flower, and if we turn it round, you will see, hopefully, this is quite difficult. Can you see? Let me open it up. Can you see the anthers there sticking out with pollen on the end? So those are the male parts of the flower. Those are the anthers, these bits in here. Okay, so you can just see the pollen sticking out on top of the anthers. If I put it sideways, you can see them sticking up now. So those are the anthers, the male part of the flower. Okay. Just trying to get it so you can see it properly. Okay, so that's my rose. Smells nice as well. So as I said, meiosis is different to mitosis in many ways. So one of which, the most obvious way, is that it produces 4 daughter cells instead of 2. And those daughter cells are going to contain half of the genetic material of the parent cell, unlike mitosis. Okay, so, and meiosis takes place in 2 nuclear divisions called meiosis 1 and meiosis 2, or the first and second nuclear division. So we will look at that in this, because compared to mitosis, which is just the one process. In meiosis, we go through the process and then we go through the process again in meiosis 2. So we will look at that in more detail. But the cells produced during meiosis, so the germ cells within the reproductive tissue, are actually diploid. They contain the full set of chromosomes, and they are the ones which are going to divide and produce the haploid cells, the ones which contain half the amount of DNA for reproduction. Okay, so within the reproductive tissue, the germ cells are going to undergo meiosis, and they are going to produce the sex cells. So the sex cells we know as gametes, which is important. Where is my gametes now? Here we go. So, just written it down to make it a bit easier for you. So meiosis produces gametes. So you'll need to remember that word, because that's the word for the sex cells that are produced. So, and this is the sperm cells in males and the ova, or the eggs, in females. Those are the cells produced by meiosis, and they are haploid. So those are the daughter cells. Even the sperm is a daughter cell. Okay, so they are haploid. They contain half the amount of DNA as the parent cell did before meiosis. Okay.